All right, welcome back. My name is JJ, and today I'm going to be talking about something that I get asked a lot about, and that is fingerstyle technique. A lot of my private students over the years, usually more towards the beginner range, ask about fingerpicking either because they think it looks and sounds cool when they see other people do it, or sometimes there's a particular song they want to play that uses fingerpicking. So I am all for working on it with them, and I have an approach that has been successful for many of my students, and it just takes practice, just like anything else. Then I've also gotten a handful of emails and Instagram messages asking about my fingerstyle jazz guitar arrangements and how I came up with that style. So I'm going to make this a two-part video lesson, and in this part I'm going to be sticking to the basics and the fundamentals that I usually work on with my beginner students. And in the next video, I will get into the free-flowing, jazzier stuff. So I'm going to lay out the path that I took to get to where I am now and what I usually recommend to people who are interested in fingerpicking of any kind. Now, before you just jump right in and start plucking away, I do recommend that you have a solid grasp on the fundamentals of beginner guitar. You're going to want to learn the open position, some chords, some simple strumming, and frankly, I've had people want to start fingerpicking in their very first lesson as soon as they come in and sit down, but I always tell them you have to be patient because you need to be able to play some chords first. Obviously, you want to get some simple strumming in, because if you can't even strum chords, how are you going to fingerpick them? So while everyone progresses at different paces, I usually recommend at least a couple of months of playing before you try to fingerpick. Otherwise, you might get a little bit frustrated. I always start everyone off with the same song, and that is Leavin' on a Jetplane, the John Denver version. It sounds a little something like this. Okay? It's a really nice, simple pattern, and it's very audible in the beginning of the song. It's fairly consistent throughout, and it's pretty much the same three chords the whole time, for most of the song. So it's a great one just to put on the recording and jam along when you're ready. And I always like learning with real music as opposed to just exercises or stuff that I make up. I prefer to learn and teach with actual songs people are familiar with. But anyway, this pattern goes a little something like this. So you start off with a G chord, and I'm going to do this in two groups of four. So the first four notes start off with your thumb on the low E string, the sixth string, you pluck that, and then you pluck the B string with your middle finger. So I got thumb on the sixth string, and then middle finger on the second string, and then I'm going to pluck the D string, the fourth string, with my thumb. I'm going to pluck the high E string, the first string, with my middle finger. So those first four notes sound like this. The next four notes start off the same way. The first three notes of the next pattern are exactly the same. So I go thumb on the low E string, middle finger on the B string, and then thumb on the D string. And then the last note in the second group of four is my first finger on the G string. So the second group of four sounds like this. When I put them together, I get the full pattern. And this is something I usually write out for people. Frankly, I can't find a tab of it, at least not on the big websites, so I usually just jot this out real simply on some paper. It's not that hard. And I'll have someone just start off with the G chord, just to get that pattern down. Just loop that a few times. Then when you're ready, you can switch to C, and it's the exact same pattern. The only difference is the lowest string you're plucking is now the fifth string, the root of that C chord. So my thumb starts on the 5th string. Let's see here. Everything else the same. And then you just switch back and forth between G and C. You do that 3 times. So I go from G to C. One more time, G to C. And then the last chord, the last 2 bars are going to be D. It's the similar pattern here. So we have thumb on the D string now, starting on the 4th string. Now I'm using my index finger on the D string, thumb on the G string, middle finger on the high E string. So that's going to sound like just like that. And then what you do here is you do a regular D chord for the first 4 notes. Then you do a D sus, and then 2 more regular Ds. So it's going to sound like sus. One more time. The whole thing sounds like this. G, let's see here, G, C, G, C, G, C, D, D sus, back to D, and then we end on G like that. So it's very enjoyable to play, and again, it's pretty much the same thing through the whole song, so it's an easy one to start with. It's also, I recommend starting off with these 3 fingers that I demonstrated with. You can also use 2. It's a little less efficient. I think 3 is perfect for this particular pattern. You can also use 4 if you'd like, you know, maybe something like this. Utilizing my ring finger. It's, you know, some people might have a little trouble using that ring finger. Other people might prefer it. So whatever's most comfortable for you, my recommendation stays at 3. So if leaving on a Jetplane sounds good after a couple weeks of practice, then we can move on to the next steps. Now I break fingerpicking down into 3 distinct techniques. The first is these flowing patterns, kind of like we did in leaving on a Jetplane. Anything where the fingers are just constantly moving individually one at a time. So my go-to song for this technique is Dust in the Wind. It has a very good pattern to know, and it's a classic song, sounds like this. Etc. This was the first fingerpicking song I ever learned, so yeah, it is one of my favorites. I do enjoy playing it, and again, it's a pattern that will come in handy in the future. If you'd rather learn something else, a couple other songs that use very similar patterns are Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. Or Just Breathe by Pearl Jam. So those are just a couple other options you have. And frankly, another feel that kind of fits into this category of just being in perpetual motion or, you know, a constant pattern is like a 12/8 or a 6/8 feel. So something like Hallelujah, you know. Something like that, or maybe like Perfect by Ed Sheeran. Just a generic 1/6/4/5. But you know, those are in constant motion. They're actually probably a little bit simpler, so maybe some people would prefer to start with those. But whatever your preference is, I just say pick a song, work on it, and then we go from there. The second type of pattern or technique that I consider essential is kind of like chordal plucking, where you're just plucking 2 or 3 notes at a time and then typically pairing it up with a bass note. And a great example of this is Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton. So there he's got these 2 notes on top, he's kind of coming back to that, repeatedly. And then he's got these bass notes, he's just alternating them. So basically you're kind of plucking the chords instead of strumming them. And it's a really simple accompaniment style, but it is effective. Another example of this one might be Hey There Delilah. Kind of just inverted there. Now the bass note comes first and the top part comes second, but same idea. And then maybe one more I like to do in this style, The Scientist by Coldplay. We're actually playing a piano part here, but it works well with this idea of finger picking. So we go like... also strum that, but again, I just kind of like to mess around with that one fingerstyle, and students tend to enjoy that as well. So in that case, I was playing, almost the full chords, 3 or more notes on top, plus that bass note. So when you're ready to take on this style, go ahead and pick one of these songs. The third technique is what I like to call fake classical guitar. And one such example is Blackbird by the Beatles, everybody's favorite. And it uses these wide intervals. These are tenths, so it's like a third, just it's an octave higher, so we have a G and a B. And yeah, whenever I hear these, I think of classical guitar. Those are kind of even similar to spread triads, which again kind of have that classical vibe. And now most of the songs I can think of that use these types of intervals are usually in the key of G, and they usually incorporate open strings. Another example might be Fast Car, which is in the it's played in G. Capo makes it a whole step higher in the key of A, but right there's those types of intervals. They're the tenths right there. And another one by Vance Joy. He sings Riptide. He's got a couple of interesting songs that kind of use this idea. One's called This Mess Is Mine. Something like that. There's the 10th. Right there. So those two examples are a little bit more involved, but they still use that 10th and that fake classical, sound, and it's good to be able to recognize that. So focusing on these 3 concepts and learning all these tunes will get you off to a pretty solid start. Of course, you can come up with your own progressions and exercises, to focus on these techniques, but as I've said, I like to teach people with real music. Now, the way I see it, most fingerpicking songs use a combination of these techniques, and eventually, when you hear somebody finger picking, you'll kind of be able to recognize the patterns, that they're doing. Just like after you've done enough strumming practice and your sense of rhythm starts to develop, you can kind of come up with a strumming pattern that's appropriate for whatever song you're trying to play. Well, the same will go for finger picking. Some general tips. You might want to start off anchoring the pinky on the pick guard. That might help give you a little bit more control when you're first starting off. I know it did for me, when I was first working on finger picking. And, until your fingers, get moving the right way, you might want to try anchoring that pinky. Now, eventually, I think you'll want to ditch that because down the road, in the long run, it is better to have a floating hand, and plus you might also want to use that pinky. But until you're comfortable enough, you can try anchoring, to start off. But again, down the road, try to release it. One other thing is that, it's all about the muscle memory for the right hand. So try to get some extra practice in. Pick up your guitar for 5 or 10 minutes a few more times a day, aside from what you already do. Something I actually recommend to a lot of people is to finger pick while you're watching TV. Now, of course, I know you want to have good focused practice, and make sure you're technically sound and doing everything right and sounding good. But you'll get to a point where, you just need to build up that muscle memory in the right hand. So I think it can actually be helpful to take your brain out of the equation and just let your hands take over. So I'm talking about like 15 to 30 minutes tops. You don't want this to be the bulk of your practice routine. But I used to do this myself, and I tell my students to do this. It can be very relaxing. You don't have to put so much pressure on yourself all the time. So just put on your favorite show or sports game or YouTube or whatever, and again, try to take your focus off the guitar and just let your hands do some work. So all these tips, techniques, and tunes will give you a solid foundation. Beyond this, there's much more you can learn, like the John Mayer slap technique, all that contemporary percussive stuff. I mean, just go on Instagram. You'll see all kind of crazy possibilities, people doing cool things. But this is pretty much the point at which I stopped. I was content with my fingerstyle abilities. Of course, down the road, I got into fingerstyle jazz guitar, which, if you're interested in that, you can check out part 2, which I'm going to go ahead and link right here. And anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more guitar content. Share your favorite fingerpicking songs in the comments below, and feel free to ask any questions you might have. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Take care.